Good evening, class. Tonight we're gonna discuss about chapter 2, poverty and equality. So we're gonna learn about absolute and relative poverty or inequality to understand poverty measures, issues, and variables. Also to appreciate poverty incidence and learn about the Lawrence curve, to reflect on the ways how to alleviate poverty and to examine poverty trap and various effects of work combinations. So let's watch this short video on the difference between poverty and economic inequality.
Contrary to what a lot of people mistakenly believe, poverty and inequality are not the same thing. Simply put, poverty describes a situation where a person doesn't have enough money to meet his basic needs, with the two main poverty types being 1. Absolute poverty, where we set a certain income level and say that those who earn less are considered poor no matter where they live. The World Bank has such a poverty limit, which was last updated back in October of 2015 and currently lies at $1.90 per day. 2. Relative poverty, which is location dependent and basically describes a state of not being able to afford your basic needs when it comes to your location. For example, someone earning $5 per day might afford the basics, including a place to live in many African countries, but not in Germany. So the relative poverty threshold is higher in Germany. In contrast, economic inequality refers to income, wealth, or anything else that is distributed unevenly. As an ultra-simplified example, we'll assume country A has 100,000 citizens, with 50,000 earning $1 per day and the other 50,000 earning $2 daily. In other words, 50% of country A's citizens live below the World Bank's poverty limit. What if next year something positive happens and the $1 per day citizens earn $2, whereas the $2 per day ones earn $10? As strange as it may seem, the two indicators tell the story in different ways because 1. Poverty has been completely eliminated now that everyone earns $2 daily or more, but 2. The income of half the citizens doubled, whereas for the other half, it's now 5 times higher. Therefore, there's currently more inequality than before, despite everyone making more money. Simple enough?
So there you have it, the difference between poverty and economic inequality. So to reiterate, to give emphasis on the absolute poverty, so it refers to having economic income or resources below a fixed minimum needed for basic survival or the poverty line. So the absolute poverty means not having enough to meet basic human needs like food, water, clean shelter, and healthcare no matter where you live. So for example, a family living on a less than 500 pesos a day, so unable to afford daily meals, or a farmer who relies only on subsistence agriculture and often go hungry during drought or crop failure. Other example is also children suffering from chronic malnutrition because of food and healthcare are unavailable. So people living in informal settlements or slums with no clean water, electricity, or sanitation. So this type of poverty threatens basic survival. So we have a picture here of uh, an absolute poverty situation. So let's now go to relative poverty. So it compares the income and spending of the poor to the richer groups in society. So relative poverty means having less than the average standard of living in your society, even if basic needs are technically met. So, for example, a family working in a wealthy country that can afford food but cannot afford rent, education, or healthcare. So, one example is that a Filipino living in, let's say, Europe, or a student who is living in Europe for, of course, for further studies. So, the quality of living he has here compared to Europe is different. So other example is also someone earning minimum wage who lives in a rich city but cannot afford internet, transportation, or proper housing. So if we can, no, if we try to look at any any Filipino or any people living in their country, they might be considered rich, but when they go to some place that the standard of living is very high, then they consider themselves as, although they earn the minimum wage, but they cannot afford the luxurious things like proper housing, or it could be going to the cafe or buying some expensive car or like that. So other example are children who cannot participate in school fully because their family lacks computers or learning resources. So this type of poverty is about inequality and exclusion, not starvation. So in contrast to absolute poverty. So here we can say that if you're living in this uh, kind or standard of living in your place is like this, but when you go to another place, no, so we can see that the standard of living here is different from what we see on the left side of the picture. So let's have a comparison between the two. When it comes to in aspect, when it comes to definition, of course, absolute poverty is a condition where people cannot meet the basic need. No, while relative is a condition where people live below the average standard living in the society. So it doesn't mean that they meet the basic need, so they are considered as living as a standard living in that society. So the basic needs, like food, water, shelter, is not being met, so absolute poverty, while in relative poverty is being met, but maybe on a different level or sometimes barely. So the measurement is the fixed international poverty line. Like, for example, what is given by the World Bank or the world standard, and relative poverty compared to median income or living standard of a country. So as I've said kanina, like the standard of living here in the Philippines is different from the standard of living in Europe or any US states. So it depends on location. Absolute poverty, it's it does not depend on location. Same minimum standard everywhere. So whether you are living in Philippines or in Europe or in US, so you are still considered poor. However, in relative poverty, it depends on the location, so it varies by country and society. So even if you're in the Philippines, the standard of living maybe in Mindanao is different from Luzon or in Visayas. So what's the common? It's in absolute, the least developed and developing countries, but in relative poverty, both developed and developing countries. So what are the living conditions? In absolute poverty, there are malnutritions, unsafe housing, lack of clean water, and health care. But in relative poverty, you can see poor housing, limited access to education, but still they have an access to education. Yun nga lang, it's limited. The healthcare and technology. So the main cause of poverty is the extreme lack of resources, while in relative poverty is the income inequality. And when it comes to real life example, so we have a family unable to afford daily meals or clean drinking water. While in relative poverty, it's just a low family income, not to afford housing or education, like in college. So the main issue here in absolute poverty is really the survival, where in relative, it's social exclusion and equality. So because if you cannot afford the luxurious cars or housing, then you are considered ex you may you may feel excluded from the social norms or standards of that certain place. So we also have the extreme poverty. So it refers to the people who lack basic necessities such as food, clean water, sanitation, housing, healthcare, and even access to information. So as you can see here, this is an example of the African children, and we also have poverty depends uh, on the country's standard of living. So there are really countries that experiencing extreme poverty, just like in the picture, as we see in mostly in Africa. No? So we have here the African poverty is teeming urban slums such as can be found in Lagos, Kinshasa, or Luanda. I haven't been into that place, so dili gani kay ko familiar with that place yet. Rural poverty is more widespread and more extreme in these places. So he notes by in 2030, some of the 9 out of 10 of these living in extreme poverty will be sub-Saharan African. No? So this proportionately rural residents of fragile states with weak institutions and often racked with conflict. So mostly gyud katong naay mga political conflicts or mga weak institutions or government institutions or um, most probably the sub-Saharan African. So what are the common traits of an impoverished countries or poor countries? So most of the poorest individuals work in agriculture and have limited education. So the text discusses global poverty, describing the common traits of poor countries, which really emphasizes on agricultural works no, and have limited education and often experience malnutrition, widen the gap between rich and poor nations. So these are the qualities or the common traits of a poor country. So what are the factors that contribute to poverty? So these are the most common, and there are maybe more. So we have here slow economic growth, so low productivity. We have a rapid urban population growth, so insufficient government services, natural disasters that really affects right now, especially the previous experience that we had in the Bagyong Tino. So most of our um, um, fellow kababayan in Cebu, in Bacolod, you know, have really experienced the disaster or the tragedy in relation to the natural disasters. We have weakened labor unions. We have also tax policies that are still on debate or still on discussions with our mambabatas, and we also have gender wage gaps. So these are the factors that contributes to poverty. So also, if we see at a global perspective, the globalization also worsen exploitation, and some countries are chosen for manufacturing simply because they offer the cheapest labor and the weakest protections. And sad to say, that happens also in the Philippines. We all know that some of the um, like factories here, even in Mindanao, are are foreign based. No? So they are owned by foreign nationals, although not entirely owned, but they are stationed here because they are they are they have stationed here because they know that we have weak government system or institution, or that our labor workforce or um, the cheapest labor can be found in the Philippines. So, how do we measure poverty? So, we have the word subsistence incidence. So it is a poverty related measure that shows how many people are living or at near mere survival level. So the percentage of individuals or families whose income or expenditure is below the subsistence threshold or the minimum amount needed to meet basic food and essential non-food needs. So that is what you call subsistence incidents. So we need to define what are the two types of inequality. So the wealth inequality refers to how unevenly asset or the wealth are distributed among the people in the society. So wealth includes savings, land, houses, businesses, stocks, and other assets, not just the income. So that's the wealth. And in highly unequal societies, a small percentage of people own a large share of total wealth, while many own little or nothing. So that's where the wealth inequality happens when we see that in a high and equal society, mas daghan ang mas gamay ang dato, mas daghan ang pobre. No? So we also have income inequality. This refers to how unevenly income is distributed among individuals or household in a country. So it looks at who earns how much, not what people own, not unlike um, wealth inequality. So in societies with high income inequality, a small group earns a large share of total income while others earn very little. No? So this is in terms of income, what the people are earning. While the wealth um, includes not only the income but also the properties owned or the assets of an individual in the society. So we have here poverty incidence or the poverty rate. It is a measure that shows how widespread poverty is in a population. So it is the percentage of people or families whose income or expenditures falls below the poverty line. So when we say it in simple terms, it tells us how many people are poor, not how poor they are. So it tells us the number of how many people are poor, not how poor they are or what 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 money do they have or how less money do they have. So it is measured using the formula number of people, individuals, or families over the total population times 100. So when we say there are 20% poverty rate or incidence in this country, so the total families in the country is 1,200 families fall below the poverty line. So that's how you get the 20% no poverty rate. So poverty rate again measures how common poverty is in a population. So it's a percentage of families whose income fall below the poverty line at a given time. So it measures the extent of poverty and how widespread poverty is in a country, just like the Philippines or in a region, and the changes no, in poverty over time. So what it does not measure is how severe poverty is. So the income inequality and the difference within the poorest household. So why poverty rate is important? Why do we need to know the poverty rate or the poverty incidence? Because it helps the government. It identifies how many people need help. No? So there are programs implemented by the government to help um, those who are poor or they cannot afford even the basic to meet the basic needs. To track progress of anti-poverty programs, or right now we are aiming for a zero hunger or zero poverty. used to compare poverty across regions or time periods, or in the Philippines, comparing different cities, regions in the country. So here we have a poverty incidence now in 2018, 2015. So this is quite outdated, but I will show you later the other actual percentage of poverty incidence or rate. So Philippines, we have measures to reduce poverty. So we have access, we have assess, expand, and enhance implementation of the government existing poverty reduction programs like conditional cash transfer, social pension program, etc. No? We ensure the implementation of the rice liberalization law to stabilize food prices and increase disposable income of families. So we have the program of DTI to, especially when seasons, peak seasons like in December, we have always a price cap no, to every um, grocery items you can find in the grocery stores or even the market. So sustain peace building efforts in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao to attract foreign and domestic investment. So that's one of the measures that would reduce poverty in the Philippines. The fast track regional infrastructure development to attract more investments not only in urban growth centers but also in other regions and provinces. So that's part of an economic growth. We have already discussed about um, the productivity. No? So part of that is the infrastructure, the how it affects the productivity of one region. So implement programs and interventions aimed at empowering human resources and creating more opportunity for stable, remunerative work. So, and also to pursue key reforms to address structural barriers. So those are the incentives that measures, I mean, to government measures to reduce poverty. So we have here the figure one poverty incidence among the basic sectors in 2018, 2021, and 2023. So as you can see, there are indicator of different sectors or um, different status of people in the community. We have senior citizens, urban residents, the youth, the women, children, farmers, fishers, and yeah, they showed various poverty incidents among all throughout 2018 to 2023. So we also have here the magnitude of poor individuals among the basic sectors. So we have here in 2018, 2021, and 2023. So we have fisher folks, the senior citizens, the farmers, the youth and urban residents, the women, and the children. I also have here an infographic from the US. So population below poverty level by the US state. So we have here the poverty rate no? So of different states. So below 9%, one and dark green, and above 18% are the red ones. So the poverty incidence and magnitude of poor individuals residing in urban areas and rural areas. So we have here the urban and the rural. So there are more poverty incidents in the rural areas compared to the urban areas. So let's now use and learn the Lorentz curve. So the rationale of the Lorentz curve is to provide a clear visual representation of the income or wealth inequality by comparing the actual distribution of income with perfect equality. So it allows economists or managers or managerial economists to assess the extent of inequality, calculate inequality measures such as the Gini coefficient, and compare income distribution across time and between different populations. So it's a graph that is used to show how income or wealth is distributed among the population, and of course to measure inequality in a country or society. And it compares perfect equality with the actual distribution of income. So it was developed by Max O. Lawrence in 1905. That's why we have the Lawrence curve. So why is it important? It helps compare income inequality. It shows whether economic growth benefits everyone or only the rich. It's is used by policymakers to design poverty reduction and redistribution policies. So what are its limitations? It's based on estimated or average data. So it does not show who are the poor, only only shows how income is distributed. And the different income distributions can sometimes produce similar curves. So it's not really a perfect indicator or measure of poverty, but at least it helps economists on comparing cumulative share of income earned by cumulative population or groups. So how Lawrence curve is drawn. So I have here an example. So the x-axis here, the cumulative share of people from the lowest to highest income, cumulative percentage of population from the poorest to the richest. So that's the x-axis, and the y-axis here is the cumulative percentage of total income earned. So the vertical line, the horizontal line is the x-axis. Two lines appear on the graph. The line of perfect equality, here we have the 45 degrees. This is the perfect line. And the Lorentz curve. So of course, it's not a line, it's a curve. So this one, the actual income distribution. So the line of perfect inequality, this one, the 45 degrees, straight line, it shows the situation where everyone earns the same income. So people fall in this line, no, have the same income. For example, the bottom here, the bottom of the line of perfect equality, earn 20% of bottom 20% of people earn 20% of income, and the bottom 50 earn 50 of income. So the Lorentz curve, the curve lies below the perfect equality. So as you can see here, it lies below the perfect equality. So it shows the real world income distribution. So the farther the curve is from the equality line, the greater the inequality. So here, marag na lang siya sa in between, no? But if it goes here, this one, wait, I'll draw. So if it falls here, no, it falls here, yan. So the greater the curve falls below the equality line, is the greater the inequality. So that's it. So for example, the bottom 50 of the population may earn 20 to 30% of the total income, and the top 10 may earn very large share of income. So what is an inequality gap? This is the area between the Lorentz curve and the line of perfect inequality. So this is, this is the Lorentz curve, and this one here in the middle, the area is the inequality gap. So the larger the gap, the larger the income inequality. So, what is a Gini coefficient? It is a numerical measure of inequality. So, it derived from the Lorenz curve. It ranges from 0 to 1. So, 0 as the perfect equality, and or sometimes written as 0 to 100. And 1 is the perfect inequality. One person earns everything. So, everyone, when you say the value is 0, everyone has exactly the same income. So the 1 here is the perfect inequality. One person has all the income, everyone else has none. So higher Gini is more inequality. So how does it relate to Lorentz curve? So it represents the area between the line of perfect inequality here, the 45 degrees, and the Lorenz curve. So the larger the gap, the larger the Gini coefficient. So why does this Gini coefficient is important? It compares the income or wealth inequality between countries. So it tracks changes in inequality over time, and it helps the government design this redistribution and social policies. So that's it. So we are now on last topic for this chapter 2, the poverty trap. So poverty trap is a situation where individuals, the households or communities remain poor over long periods of time because the conditions of poverty reinforce themselves, so making it extremely hard to escape even with effort. So poverty trap, it's like you are being trapped in a routine or in a maze or in a cycle, no, that you cannot go out for a very long period of time. So you remain poor for a very long period of time. So what are the is this happening in reality? Yes, of course. No, as people, so since we have already talked about the factors that affects and that contributes to poverty, so those factors may be included in the poverty trap, so you are in that cycle, no? So if you fail to at least get out from the cycle or get out from the trap, then you will always remain in there. So that is why education helps, quality education helps, scholarship, the government program. So the role of the government and NGOs, some programs focus on a short-term aid. Others may unintentionally discourage work if employment opportunities are lacking. So that is why government uh, have really given us different kinds of incentives. Programs to alleviate poverty. They have the DTI, no programs, or even the TESDA schools that are offering basic skills, no, for jobs. So without jobs, skills, training, and access to education, poverty returns once aid stops. So that's the reality. So if the government only give or release allowances for poor people, but they are not teaching the poor people on how to earn a living, then the resources will dry up eventually. So they will keep on coming um, more and ask for more. So in the so why poverty persists worldwide, not just only in the Philippines, but in global terms. No? So poverty persists because income inequality limits opportunity. So if um, there are there's only one person who is very rich and the others are very poor, then it limits opportunity. So of course, if you don't have the capital to start even a small business, then of course you cannot um, at least earn more, no, or start your own business. Technology favors skilled workers, leaving the unskilled behind. So if if a country does not um, update or trained workers on the newest technology, then it would be left behind and they will not be able to compete in the global market, and thus it will affect poverty. So because of course, since we are living in a digital world and most of us are transacting in a e-commerce market or economy, then if you cannot be on the on you cannot be updated on the trend, then you will be left out. So poor regions lack infrastructure and investment. So we I've let you see now that the different infrastructures in northern Mindanao that was proposed or even started not to construct. So if those will be developed and more infrastructures will be developed, then more investment will come in the country, and of course that would increase economic growth and development. So if the regions lack those infrastructures, needed infrastructures, then of course it will remain undeveloped, unproductive, and poor. So the repeated crisis like the pandemic, the climate shocks, the conflicts reset progress. So one of the limitations of economic growth and development, as I've discussed, is the institutions. So if we have weak political stability, if we don't have political stability and weak institutions, then that would affect the progress of the region, and also it would repeat and the same cycle goes for a very long time if deletion or break. So let's break poverty trap. So how do we do that? So we have a long-term solution, and that includes quality education and skills training. So education is something that we can um, pass on to many generations, and that is the only thing that cannot be, it cannot be steal, it cannot be stolen, no, or cannot be taken away from you. So the stable employment opportunities, of course, that is provided by or given by the government. The access to healthcare and nutrition, because that also affects nutrition and health affects the well-being of a person, and that affects his productivity, no, and eventually the economic growth and development of a society. The social protection balance with job creation and the investment in rural areas and agriculture, since most of the people that, as I've discussed in the beginning of the chapter, most of the poorest countries came um, from the people who worked in the agriculture section. Then might as well let us invest in rural areas and agriculture projects or programs. So poverty reduction. So why does the government action matters when it comes to poverty reduction? Because it creates policies to improve people's welfare, and poor households face higher risk of health issues, unemployment, drug dependence, illiteracy, homelessness, and being victims or perpetrators of crime. So this can be monitored closely by the government, and there are programs implemented or measures being done in order to set the policies in place now to improve people's welfare. So what are the poverty reduction initiatives or actions? First one is the CCT program or the cash transfer program. So what are they? There are programs that give money to poor families in exchange for meeting conditions like school attendance and health checkups. So saan naman siya gina-used? In Latin America, in Africa, and also in the Philippines. We have 4Ps, the Pantawid Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program. So that is also being monitored by the government. No? So the four P's goal is to improve health, nutrition, and education of children 0 to 18 years old. And it provides monetary support to the poorest families. But sad to say, there are others are not only um, not striving hard, no, or working hard because they are lenient with the monetary support given by the government or from the four P's no program. They offer social development programs also and help families break the poverty cycle. So next one is the in-kind transfers. What are these? These are initiative or poverty reduction that reduces poverty not only through cash assistance but also through direct provision of goods and services. So these are delivered through specialized welfare programs such as social pension for senior citizens, supplementary feeding programs for children and vulnerable groups. So we have here feeding programs in the elementary department or um, the malnourished children. We have temporary shelter for the homeless and those affected by disasters, calamities, or conflict. We have here in Calaanan, no, relocation site for the victims of disasters or calamities. We have free medicines and vaccines, including flu shots from local health centers. So these programs act as a social safety nets, ensuring that indigenous people receive essential goods and services even without cash. So others also are giving work incentives. So these programs are commonly implemented when national disasters occur. People who are displaced or lose their jobs because of calamities are offered paid work opportunities to rebuild communities, earn reasonable wage, and support family during hardships. So this provides both income and dignity, allowing affected individuals contribute to community recovery while receiving compensation. So we also have minimum wage law. So in order to reduce poverty, we have and also reduce income inequality, we have the minimum wage law. The law is passed by Congress or the Senate to mandate a minimum wage for workers based on geographic location. So the minimum wage here in Cagayan de Oro is different in Manila or any part, maybe some in Visayas, and duration and nature of work and type of industry. So in type of industry, we have factories, we have service industries, um, we have merchandising industries. No? So duration and nature of work, it could be the project hire, the casual, or the probationary, or the regular employees. So the purpose is to ensure that workers receive a fair income that enables them to meet basic needs. So this is done with a computation to derive what is the minimum wage for a specific region or specific area. So supporters argue that this protects low-income workers at a non-government mga offices also. So a just tax code. So when ex-president Rodrigo Duterte assumed the office, no, we have the train law or the revised train law. So the goal of the tax reforms is to make taxation fair and equitable. So the key intention is to ensure that low-income individuals pay zero income tax. So, but the higher the income, also mo taas pa lang yung tax. So collecting more taxes from higher earners based on the principle of ability to pay, reducing loopholes used by the wealthy to avoid taxes. So of course, those who are tax evaders are being penalized. And we also have sin tax, that is the luxury tax now given to those who are who can really afford luxury items, or just like habits, or what do you call this, leisure. So fixing ambiguities in the tax system to ensure just and uh, I mean com in a just implementation. So a sustainable, we also have sustainable development. So here, sorry, we have sustainable development goals. So the goal of tax reform is to make taxation fair and equitable, and its key intentions includes, no, those who are kind to reduce, to reduce poverty and income inequality. So the United Nations identified poverty reduction as a priority global challenge. So it's not just in the Philippines, but also it's a challenge and given to all countries around the world. So the SGDs outline several key actions for developing countries to reduce poverty. That is to improve access to sustainable livelihoods and opportunities that is right now given by the CSWD or the DSWD or even the DTI. No, they are giving sustainable livelihood programs and opportunities, provide universal access to basic social services, develop stronger social protection systems. We also have to empower people living in poverty. So we have seminars, motivational talks, or even some like workshops given in the communities or the barangays. And also to address poverty's disproportionate impact on women. So we have empowering women. Uh, so strengthen cooperation with donors and recipients, and also intensify international cooperation. So those are the sustainable development goals in addressing zero poverty. So that's the end of chapter 2, and I hope you've learned something. So again, we are chapter 2 talks about poverty and inequality. So once again, thank you and good evening.